friends. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Pandocap. We have a special guest here today, but before we turn it over to her, I wanted to share a little bit of background. Now that we're coming out of the other end of the shutdowns, startups and investors are focused on opportunities that will create the next generation of build disruptors. Thank you for being with us today, Andrea. Can you please share a little bit about your background with our audience and your journey on how you got here?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me, Laura. I spent some time at NASDAQ, which was really exciting because NASDAQ had just launched their private company initiative. And at that point, I really got immersed in this concept of the secondary market, this new evolution of private company activity where private companies are realizing that their shareholders can access some liquidity ahead of an IPO, which really is empowering people to diversify and capture that wealth that they otherwise really had to wait to realize. And now I'm a general partner at a venture fund called Manhattan Venture Partners.
We know more investors are putting a focus on profitability from coming out of 2019. Do you have a gauge on how badly the current environment and the future of cash flow is affecting startups?
The conversation has shifted. And now when you speak to a company that's thinking about fundraising, the number one question that's being asked is, what is your burn rate? And how much runway do you have currently? And this is something that investors are asking ahead of the discussion around what the terms of a round would be. So I would say ultimately, this is a question that I think was ingrained in, a latter part of the due diligence process that investors would ask companies during their fundraising. But now it's the first question they ask. And I think it's really a testament to saying to the company, we really want to know how prudent you've been with your balance sheet up until now. Because if we deploy capital, toward this company, we want to know that that capital is going to be deployed, accurately and deployed efficiently. And also, what kind of initiatives the company has, both from a, user generation and marketing funnel perspective.
Are you seeing startups shift their features to being more remote focused around bringing communities or users together?
So I think what's really interesting about the remote workforce is that I think something that's a really important theme about being remote these days, and now more than ever with the difficult times we're going through, is that being remote means having that community and building that community amongst both the employees at a company, but also their communities, their user communities. And so I've seen a shift towards companies saying that they actually have a remote focused team that is actually based around building the initiatives within the company to ensure that all of the remote workers are centralized and getting that sense that, hey, even though you're in various towns and cities, we are still a team. We're still going to accommodate the fact that there are multiple time zones that are being reflected here, and that we're going to try to accommodate everyone's schedules. And it doesn't have to be as 9 to 5 anymore, which I think is going to be the most interesting shift as we go towards a more remote workforce.
Do you see this as a new reset for investors?
I do. So, overall, I'm going to address this both in the early stage as well as the late stage. So in the early stage, I would say, as an investor, all of my friends, including myself, who act as an angel investing capacity, we're telling companies that, you don't necessarily need to be in one geography or another to thrive, right? And I would say overall, it's hard to look over the fact that actually does benefit the investing community in a sense by saying you might not need to raise at that really large valuation you were originally planning for. You could keep it lean, you could keep it mean, and you could keep it a little bit more remote until the company realizes that you might want to centralize around a specific geography. And that might be because of, the fact that you have certain customers in various geographies, or you might see that you have a leadership team that really thrives in one geography or another. And that starts at the infancy of a company. So the early stage is really thinking on a much more global basis. And then in the late stage, we're seeing companies open offices in states and areas where they can build their teams and say, hey, we don't necessarily need to, take a hit on the OpEx of our company by having everyone in Silicon Valley.
What are your projections for the rest of the year and then going into 2021?
So if I think about this just from a very realistic, subjective nature, I think that we're obviously experiencing some of the most difficult times from a macro and societal impact perspective that the world's ever seen. And I think that it really does take the startup and, along with the public company community to stand up and have a voice during all of this if they can and if it's appropriate. And I think that this is the time where actions have to speak so much louder than words. So as much as we all like to knock the likes of SoftBank, I am very humbled to see that they are taking the initiative to launch the $100 million diversity fund, which was announced today. And I think overall some of the commentary their COO made around being held accountable to the diversity numbers and the deployment of that capital is something that they will stand by and they will report on and they will continue to make strides toward.
Thank you for being on Pandocap today. We really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks so much for having me, Laura. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak to you.